So please give a very warm Startupfest Growth Week welcome to Olivia Train and Josh Lefkowitz. Hi, Olivia. Hi, Josh.
Hey, Alistair.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I would normally say that's going to be a tough act to follow, but Josh, having heard what you talked about when we spoke, I think you're going to provide a really fresh angle that kind of complements what Leslie and Jonathan were talking about. And I share your tragic admission. I wish I had heard their presentation long before I went out to raise money. So hopefully you can put that into context with your experience. So have a great conversation. And then obviously there'll be an office hours breakout room for folks to talk with people from Georgian. And as questions come up, I will paste in the chat. You guys can address them as you go. So have a great chat.
Fantastic. Thanks.
Awesome. Hey, Josh, how are you?
Hey, Olivia. Doing well. Have our new puppy at my feet who's joined us 2 days ago. So if you hear some barking or howling, apologies in advance. He's a Bernese Mountain Dog puppy on his way to 110 pounds, but currently is a tiny fur baby trying to figure out his place in the world.
That is so sweet. Well, I hope we hear from him. What's his name?
Murphy.
Murphy. That's amazing. Well, congratulations on the new puppy. Well, super excited to chat today. Hopefully we can live up to that last presentation and bring some of those concepts to life a little bit.
Pretty high bar. That was fantastic.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. But I'd love to just maybe to start off, hear a little bit about Flashpoint and what you guys do. Obviously, myself and the rest of the Georgian team are familiar, but just to get the audience acquainted with Flashpoint.
Yeah, for sure. So the quick thumbnail sketch on Flashpoint, we are a New York City-based cyber intelligence company that focuses on providing expansive coverage and insight into threatening activity online. So we support a broad array of different use cases and teams across the enterprise and public sector globally. So for example, we help customers bolster their cyber and physical security, defend and detect fraud and insider threat, and also support a broad range of different mission requirements across different public sector needs. So for example, counterterrorism and counter-narcotics. We are a SaaS business, but also provide services. And to provide some additional color there, we have an analyst team that speaks more than 25 different foreign languages with deep domain expertise across an expansive spectrum of different illicit actor communities. And then they work closely with an engineering team that's focused on collecting data at scale in an automated and persistent way from some of the most austere illicit communities in the ecosystem. And we founded the company in 2010 in my co-founder's second bedroom in the West Village of Manhattan. We're privileged to now be a trusted partner to hundreds of customers globally, including about 40% of the Fortune 100.
That's awesome and such a neat mix. I would love to go to a Flashpoint company social or something and meet all those folks. So, I mean, the topic of our chat is about fundraising. So I'd love to just hear a little bit about your fundraising history and the experience you've had fundraising to date.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been quite a journey. As I mentioned, we founded the company in 2010. And as mentioned at the outset, we were fortunate in many ways to have grown the company out of my co-founder's consultancy. So he'd been running a consultancy from 2004 to 2010, again, in his second bedroom in the West Village, primarily providing support to U.S. and other Western law enforcement on terrorism investigations and prosecutions that had an online nexus. He was also an on-air terrorism analyst for NBC News. So that provided a steady, repeatable, predictable stream of consulting revenue, but it was woefully unscalable. And so as we founded the business, we used that consulting revenue really as our oxygen and lifeblood to keep the lights on, to build out a very small, lean and mean team, and begin to explore how we could build technology to evolve into a SaaS company, and also how we could evolve our target market from purely a public sector go-to-market motion into an enterprise focus. We raised a small friends and family round in 2013 and 2014. And then after developing enough proof points that validated our product market fit, as well as some early referenceable customers, We finally raised our first institutional venture capital round in 2015, which was a $5 million Series A. Followed that on, building on our momentum with a $10 million Series B in 2016. And then we're fortunate enough to partner with your team at Georgian with a $28 million Series C in 2017. And Georgian, I must say, has been an incredible partner, a true extension of our team, and really all that I think anyone could aspire to as far as not just a source of capital, but true expertise and true operational excellence that they've helped us drive.
That's awesome and very kind of you. I'm curious, like when you were sort of transitioning from a consulting business to a SaaS business, and you went out to raise that Series A, what were some of the proof points you had to say, okay, this is the first time I'm going to go raise an institutional round of funding to scale up the SaaS business? What were some of the sort of signals that you had that made you think that it was sort of the right time to go out and raise?
Yeah, so it was a really interesting time for us. So in addition to being a leading expert on how terrorists were using the internet, our co-founder was also a self-taught coder. And many of the professional engineers in the audience will probably snicker, but he coded in PHP. And so he hand jammed some alphas and generously some betas together so that we would have something to go out and show the market. That's a lot easier than just having slideware and a vision to try to test market demand. And lo and behold, in 2012, 2013, 2014, we began to see some fantastic market feedback, not only from our legacy buyers and customers within the public sector, but also some of the largest banks in the world. And we took an approach where we knew we needed to get referenceable customers. And we knew that showing a track record of not only winning their business, but also renewing their business was by far the most important thing that we could do. And so we went in extraordinarily flexible on price. I mean, if you saw our ACV with some of our first commercial customers, you would be shocked. We're talking about single-digit thousands. Those customers over the years have grown into multi-$100,000 customers. But we recognize that those proof points up front were critically valuable, as well, and arguably even more importantly, was the feedback that they would provide to us as we were getting our arms around what it meant to become a SaaS company and what it meant to sell into the enterprise. And so once we'd validated that product market fit, our first 5 customers in the enterprise were 5 of the largest banks, not only in the US, but globally. We used that as a launch pad to subsequently go out to have some initial conversations with VCs. That being said, it was not a straight line. Back in 2014, the market that we were operating in, and in our early days, we were heavily deep and dark web focused in terms of our messaging, our positioning, our product development. That was not a market that meant really anything to anyone. It was very much over the horizon. There was a need for a ton of education about what deep and dark web even was, let alone why it was a compelling market and why Flashpoint had the opportunity to be the market leader, carving out a massive opportunity that would get VCs excited about a return profile. And so at that point, those conversations were far more oriented around vision and strategic opportunity than hardcore proof points, because even with the early traction that we had, it was still an incredibly early stage story to be telling.
Got it. And when you went out to raise that round, how did you know like how many investors to target in any sort of outreach that you did, or how many warm intros to get? And how did you know which investors to target? Did you just go on their websites, or did you sort of ask around other founders? Just kind of curious how you manage sort of the outreach and business development process of your raise.
Yeah, well, I certainly wish I'd heard Leslie and Jonathan's presentation when I was going through the journey, because there was a lot of discovery. There were a lot of fits and starts. There was a lot of stepping in potholes. And what Leslie and Jonathan said about this, truly being the CEO's job was my experience as well. I'm a first-time founder. We're headquartered in New York City, as I mentioned. I did not have an expansive Rolodex of VCs in my speed dial. So it was a lot of pounding the pavement, just pure persistence, building out a target list of VCs that invest in security that would write the type of check size that we were looking for. And as I mentioned, we raised 5. That also, had a interest in taking a bet on a market that was not necessarily proven out like many other components of security. And also, as we got to know what we were looking for in an investor, we also began to index a bit more heavily on VCs who were also operators in a prior life, not purely financial investors. Because what we were realizing was we were doing this for the first time. We had no illusions that we had all the answers. In fact, we knew we didn't have most of them. And so we were really looking for not only a capital source, somebody that could write a check, but also who could be a true partner, who could be a true extension of our team, and could help us in what we knew was going to be an incredibly long and incredibly topsy-turvy roller coaster, where we wanted to have folks that had been in the trenches before, had learned lessons that we knew we would be benefiting from. And that's exactly what we found in our Series A lead, tech operators out of Georgia. They built a multi-billion-dollar company that had IPO'd and then subsequently sold to IBM. And so they had a lot of pattern recognition. They had a lot of battle scars from the experiences that they had in our earliest days. And even at this point of scale, that type of experience to be able to lean on is just immensely valuable.
Got it. And when you were stepping into those first investor meetings, how did you get prepared for those? And if you're giving advice to an early stage founder today, what would you say are some of the key questions they should be prepared to answer in some of those early meetings?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Leslie and Jonathan did a tremendous job of hitting those 28. So I'm mindful of being duplicative. I'll just hone in on 4 or 5 that were most frequently recurring as we were going through the process. First and foremost was around the total addressable market. And we've heard that at every subsequent capital raise. How do you really paint a defensible, albeit thumbnail sketch of what the market looks like that you're playing in, and what sort of market share can you estimate that you can capture? Secondly, in those early stage conversations in the Series A, they're heavily focused on team. They want to understand a level of confidence that they have in you to take the money that they'll be investing and really, as a sound fiduciary, invest it thoughtfully, invest it strategically, and really be that trusted partner that they're looking for to build a large and market-defining business. Third is around the exit trajectory. And as Leslie and Jonathan mentioned, a lot of this is aspirational. It ties into my earlier comment around strategic vision. And while the journey of investing in a startup is very much around how they can help you get off the ground, they also want to have that over the horizon look to understand how you think about where the business can go and where a strategic home may be for it 5, 7, 10 years down the road. And then fifth, what we found was since we were really starting to evolve into a technology company, to hear us talk about how we think about our roadmap. What will this capital do from a catalyst perspective to hypercharge your technology development engine? How do you think about milestones around that? And how do you think about what that capital will get you from a cash runway and ramp perspective?
Got it. And sort of flipping that around, obviously founders are very prepared to answer the questions that investors are going to ask them, but did you have any sort of key questions to ask prospective investors in your business? And how did you go about diligencing your VCs?
Yeah, and that was a particularly important one for us. I personally and our team really indexes heavily on cultural alignment. And so one of the things that was most important for me was really understanding the fit. And fit can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But in my experience, that alignment around expectations, definitions of success, and also how you will collaborate in times of challenge was paramount. It's easy to think that it's going to be rainbows and puppies for the next 5, 7, 10 years of your journey. But the brutal reality is this is an incredibly grueling roller coaster, and there are going to be some incredibly dark days. And so to understand how you can truly collaborate with your investment partners, and that's how I see them. This is a true extension of your team. You are getting married to the folks that are writing your checks, particularly those that are in your boardroom. And so you want to have the highest degree of confidence and visibility around how you're going to work together, how you're going to collaborate, what those expectations around communication cadence, as well as I mentioned, the type of value that they can add beyond simply writing a check. Ways to do that beyond having deep conversations where you look into the whites of their eyes is doing additional back channel validation. Certainly part of that is speaking to others in their portfolio company. You'll likely get some references that they'll give you. In some ways, those are not going to be as valuable because they're going to give you folks that are going to say the nicest and warmest things about them. So looking at other creative ways to get to folks who either are in their portfolio or who may have gone through the term sheet process with them and didn't consummate a marriage, and also finding ways to speak to peers of theirs, as well as others with whom they serve on boards of director seats.
Got it. Yeah, those are some really, really good tips. And I'm curious, like during certainly your early stage fundraisers, but even later on, did you have any sort of thrown in the deep end and learn to swim type moments during your fundraising process? And what did you learn from those?
Yeah, absolutely. We had more than I'd like to remember. And, this comes back to, I think, inexperience, as well as, the need to really have a trusted lawyer and advisor that can help you navigate the process once you get to term sheet. So we've seen a lot of tricks in the book. Leslie and Jonathan mentioned how time is on the side of investors. They want to see every additional proof point that they can that helps them get more comfort with the risk of the business, with additional customers, with additional pipe. And related to that is also cash runway. So we absolutely had situations where one investor in particular had full line of sight into our cash balance. It was not particularly robust, and every day that dwindled, they gained additional leverage in the negotiation. I'd also emphasize that dissecting a term sheet is really an art and a science. And if you've never done this before, your eye is inevitably going to go to the headline, which is pre-money valuation. You see it across the financial press, the next unicorn, et cetera, et cetera. It is easy. It is tantalizingly easy to become addicted to that number and lose sight of everything else on that term sheet that can read like mumbo jumbo. But in the brutal reality is the pre-money valuation in many instances is the least important component of that term sheet. And ensuring that you work with a trusted lawyer, a trusted advisor to really understand all the other different potential gotchas, whether it's preference, whether it is participation, whether it's all the different levers that can be layered into a term sheet that you may not understand, but that can have implications for the entirety of the remaining life of your business.
Got it. And just to wrap up here, Josh, I see Alistair coming back on our screens. What's the one most important piece of advice you'd have for an early stage founder when they're going out to raise? If you can narrow it down to one, might be tough.
Yeah, I'd say feedback is a gift. And you go out, you're talking about your baby that you feel so deeply passionate about, that you've been devoting your life to, that you have a vision around that many others may simply not understand. And you are going to get far more no's than maybes and even more no's than yeses. And it can be a process that can that can really beat you down and leave you feeling deflated, because it always takes longer than you think. You always get far more twists and turns than you think. But I would really encourage everyone to swallow your pride, to have a dispassionate conversation with those that turn you down, and really understand in a clinical way the why behind that, and use that feedback as a gift that helps you constantly improve not only your pitch, but also how you think about your business and how you build your business going forward.
Love it. Feedback is a gift. That's a good thing to remember. Awesome.
And I think it's a great compliment to the talk that Leslie and Jonathan gave, because you're really coming at it from two different approaches: early stage versus late stage. There's a lot more history and roadmap when you're doing a Series C, where you can go back and look at the past and see evidence, as opposed to deciding whether you want to call yourself pre-revenue, which is obviously a much earlier stage decision. So it's really nice to see those two perspectives. Thank you both so much for sharing that with us.
Yeah, thanks for the conversation. And I would just add that you quickly develop pattern recognition on what those objections are. And so we found it very helpful after we saw the same questions coming up to just lean into them, to proactively say early in a meeting, we know investors like you may have concerns about X, Y, and Z. Let's talk about those.
Yeah, shooting the elephant in the room right away is always a great strategy in that regard, because it gets the awkwardness away, and awkwardness kills all deals. So yeah.
Exactly.
So Olivia, you're going to be around shortly for the office hours that we're going to do. Josh, if people want to find out more about Flashpoint, where do they go?
Flashpoint-intel.com, and appreciate the time and opportunity. Olivia, thanks for the conversation.
Thanks so much, Josh. Appreciate it.